Yeah, absolutely. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. You can call me, but I don't think I want other listeners to call me, because if they call me, guess what? I will never get my work done. But if you call me, that's okay. You can interrupt me. I will let you interrupt me. But I do have a lot to get to today. And I argue for local economy and the free market. And I have correspondence from Pikeville I wanted to bring up to you and tell you a little bit about. It's a new correspondent. I have a growing crop of correspondence in the prison system, partly because I have an interest in penal reform, having the idea from the scriptures that prisons are ungodly, and that is because they are not just because they are schools for crime and places where homosexuality runs rampant among many prisoners are made victim by the covetings of their superiors in the neighboring cells. It is ungodly for many reasons, but partly because God wants justice from the courts, and He doesn't allow prisons. Prisons are not part of His perfect will. They are, in fact, a judgment. They are in fact, a misreading and misinterpretation by good humanists of what justice is. And there is no penance that takes place in the penitentiary anymore, if there ever has been. The letter is from a man named Robert Whipple, and it's neatly typed. And I can't tell if it's how this letter was generated, but he refers to me, Dear Mr. Tulis. And he tells me that he has gotten my name and address from another inmate, Grenda Harmer. Grenda Ray Harmer's a man in Wartburg. This man is in Pikeville, and he has a problem with which you might wonder why about me when I admit this, but I have a great interest in law, and I have a great interest in a law library. I wish I had a law library myself. And if you have, just by the way, if you are just tuning in and happen to be an attorney and want to pass along, give a good home to your set of Tennessee jurisprudence encyclopedias, please let me know. I would love to take those off your hands for just perusal reading. My copies of books like that are all marked up and tagged and yellow sticky noted and so on. There's a lot to read, and I would like to do more reading and have my own volumes. I do have the privilege, after a law firm collapsed downtown about 4, 5, 6 years ago, of having my own copy of American Jurisprudence. It's worth a couple $1,000, maybe 130 volumes, and I'm glad to have that. I use it a great deal, often just for basic things like what is transportation, for example, or what is arrest, or what is conflict of laws, that things that come up sometimes in covering the news. I read. So not having access to a law library is, for me, a heinous offense. Not having access to a Black's Law Dictionary or a Corpus Juris Secundum, if I had to do research there, or case law through Westlaw or LexisNexis. These are serious, serious problems. So here's an inmate who is touching me, touching me on a very unusual point that resonates with me. And that is that Robert Whipple is being denied access to law books and law cases in Pikeville. He is at Pikeville and is at the Pikeville Correctional. I'm sorry, it's Bledsoe County. It's called BCCX, Bledsoe County Correctional Complex. The warden over there is Darren Settles, and this is a facility, a state slave center on Horsehead Road. It's 1045 Horsehead Road in Pikeville, just over the ridge. And so we have this slave center there. Well, no, hold on a second. You say you object to the word slave center. Well, we have slavery in Tennessee. It's in the Bill of Rights. Okay. In the Bill of Rights, you have the right, the constitutionally guaranteed God-given right not to be enslaved. Okay, except, well, just read Section 33. Slavery and involuntary servitude are, except as a punishment for the crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, are forever prohibited in the state. So you're protected from being enslaved, except for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. There you may be enslaved, right? You may be bent over, or should I say bent under the demand of an involuntary servitude to a master who has, as we're hearing from Grenda Harmer at Nooganomics.com, the master is feckless. He's feckless, but he's allowing his corporate buddies to profit. That seems to be the report from Wartburg and Grenda Ray Harmer. The problem here in this correspondence from my correspondent is that that Robert Whipple can't get a hold of his legal materials. He was sentenced to 14 years for burglary and theft, and he's filed multiple lawsuits, and he gives the citations for them. They're all in process. For example, Whipple versus Schofield, Whipple versus Rochelle, Whipple versus Millay, and at least one other one. He's been making claims on civil rights violations, deliberate indifference to my serious medical needs, retaliation for filing lawsuits and grievances, and denial of access to courts, and then denial of due process. These are all things. The word due process is a kind of magic word, I must say, and should be viewed with great care. Now, the problem is, as he's explaining to me, that he would like to bring to my attention that the warden Gobble, that's the warden in this, as of this writing. The name I'm giving you from the website is from the website from Bledsoe County. Darren Settles is the name given there. Is actively trying to stop my litigation efforts right now, he says, by denying me access to the law library. He says, I'm housed at the annex, which is a minimum security portion of the prison. We don't have a law library, so for 30 years, they simply let us go to the main law library at Site 2 when we needed to do some legal research. Gobble was named as a defendant in my most recent lawsuit, Whipple versus Tennessee Board of Parole, filed in June. The following month, in July, Gobble suddenly declared that annex inmates, that's where he is, can no longer go to the law library, but must send a request. Here, this is where it gets really bureaucratic. Okay, I think you can follow along with this. Just let your mind relax. Okay? Don't try to solve this thing as you hear it, but just let your mind relax and just kind of follow the flow of the easing, if you will. This is a bit of legal constipation that this inmate is grimacing over, and it's painful indeed to hear how the rules are arranged so that a man is thwarted in his researches. The warden suddenly declared that annexed inmates can no longer go to the law library, but must send a request. Okay. Given the timing and the fact that for the first month or so I was the only prisoner not allowed to go, I think it is clear that I am the target in retaliation for my lawsuit. The request or paging system that Cobble put in place has been found constitutionally inadequate by many federal courts. But BCCX, that's in Pikeville, isn't interested in following the law. Another annexed prisoner, John Brichetto, who is appealing his conviction, was court ordered to receive access to Westlaw, which is, of course, the online case law database available at the main BCCX library, but not at the annex. But Cobble has defied this court order because he's afraid I could then argue that I, too, should have access. The paging system is a failure for many reasons. Okay, and then he begins an enumeration of this system of how it is. Just get this: you're trying to you're trying to gather your research together, and to state your claim. It is too slow. It takes 5 or 6 days to get a response, while federal courts only allow 14 days to respond to a motion, including time needed for mailing. So if you have a motion, you have to have time for the mailing of it, and then you have to have time to do the research, but then you have to wait 4 or 5 days at the beginning of a 14-day clock, right? They will only send cases if you cite them exactly. Okay, so if you leave out a comma or put a space in where there's not a space, like 2D, often there's no space between a number of a citation, a page number, and then the volume number. If you put a space in there, you're not going to get it. Well, anyway, he says, unless you cite them exactly. This is a classic catch-22. If I can get cases I already know well, no, he says, I can get cases I already know well enough to cite. But I pretty much already know what was said, so I don't really need them. The undiscovered cases, whether because I haven't come across them in my prior research or because they're new, I cannot see because I cannot cite them. They charge you, and that's number 2. Number 3, they charge you just to view them. By policy, you're only supposed to pay if you decide to keep them and are supposed to have 5 days to review them. Okay, so you can review a case. BCCX prison officials make you sign a withdrawal authorization just to see them and charge you for cases even if you return them. Okay, that's really bad. Now, hear about the poverty of these inmates. Therefore, indigent prisoners like me aren't able to get cases because we can't afford them. Printouts of cases often run 50, 75, or even 100 pages. And they print the whole case, not just the paragraph that applies to your case, and charge 15 cents a page for all of them. As prisoners, as slaves, I'm putting the word in there, we only make $20 to $60 per month, which also has to pay for hygiene items and phone calls and postage. We can either view cases or purchase soap and shampoo. Well, if you're like me, you'd probably skip the shampoo. Probably not the soap. I would just use the soap on my head every week and pay for the cases. BCCX, he says, it's actually like 4 prisons. And then he has another problem he wants to bring to my attention. But I tell you that because what we have here are people who are, they're at wit's end. And they are slaves. They're state slaves. And you see, because I understand servitude as a constitutional situation, right? We have a constitutional understanding here on the David Tulis show of state slavery. We have state slavery today, but we do not have private slavery. And what was banished in the American experience of it's a war of northern aggression, it's a war to prevent southern independence, was an abolition of private slavery. Look at the 13th Amendment, for example, well, not for example, but as pointing this out. And that says in the first section, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. The Tennessee is just like that. Shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Notice the word their jurisdiction. It's not its jurisdiction, it's their jurisdiction. Because the founders, even those who added amendments later, this one in 1865, of course, these aren't founders anymore, but these people understood the United States to be a plurality, not a singular entity, not a unitary single entity, a plural noun, not a singular noun, or any subject or any place subject to their jurisdiction. It says in the last 3 words there, or 4 words there before the period. The second section, just by the way, says Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So we have slavery in America. And so because we have slavery in America, my own view about the cause of the South to become a separate nation is largely sympathetic, even though I would say that there was a fundamental problem with the South's effort. It was a centralized government effort to thwart a centralized government effort. Now, if that's the way of putting that war and that conflict, in which the South was truly the aggrieved party and was not the party that started the war, even though its smoothbores fired the first cannonballs at Fort Sumter. I'm not sympathetic to the North, and I'm sympathetic to the South because its grievances were real. Primarily, the grievance was of the moral tariff and other taxes that raised costs for all manufactured goods across the South, because the North wanted protection, Yankee protection of its steel industries in Pennsylvania and New York. My thinking is that the war was not about slavery, and when we look at the evils of slavery as an institution, they are often not as bad as they are today. We have slavery today of a worse kind, and that's because it's not chattel slavery, it's not personal slavery, it's state slavery, and it is much more grievous. And in fact, we are the biggest slave nation in the world. We have more people in prison than were ever in the Soviet Gulag, put there under Stalin's show trials in the late 1930s. We have people there for cause, one war or the other. They are incarcerated, making no value, and many of them make profits for private industry through Unicor and of course Unicor and other businesses. And here in Tennessee, we have the Corrections Corporation of America, a publicly traded company. I think the shares are about $24 or $25, and it makes a profit too. And as we are hearing in my analysis here on the David Tulis show, it is making a profit with fraud. There is a fraudulent, there are accusations of fraud by an inmate who got $40 out of the deal. He was paid $40 to take part in a job program that he says didn't exist, and so he has an inducement as an impoverished inmate inmates earn between $20 and $60 a month. He had every reason to keep his mouth shut for the remainder of his term. He was duly convicted and enslaved on account of aggravated robbery and other charges, a 25-year sentence for which he has to spend 100% of the sentence in prison. I'm noticing here my time is running low, and we've got a lot to get to. I want to mention something about kind of my news summary. Right, we don't have time for really a news roundup, but I do want to mention just a couple things. Let me just skim this pile. Would you mind if I do that? Would that be okay? It's 800-8949, 800-8949. David Carroll, the noted journalist in Chattanooga, is celebrating 40 years on the air, 30 years at Channel 3. And the story by the WRCB staff says that he signed on as a DJ at KZ 106 in 1979 and then moved to television, joining Helen Hardin at the morning anchor desk at Channel 3. And in 87, David Carroll came to Channel 3 to anchor live at 5:30. So he's a very well-known man. I'd say if I were going to rank the journalists as important of importance and veracity in Chattanooga, I would say probably at the leading journalist is probably Judy Walton at the Chattanooga Times-Free-Press. She and Dave Flessner, the business editor, are leading the pack. And then number 3, I would say for respect, integrity, and knowledge of the community, probably would be David Carroll. David Carroll knows everybody. Everybody knows him. He's highly respected. He gets the facts right. He has a son who was a writer at the Chattanooga Times-Free-Press when I was an editor there. Very sound young man who went on to become a staffer for a federal senator. And so he's a media person who knows everybody and is highly respected. And I would say has some depth to him as a person. So that's just a note for David Carroll. Highly listenable, agreeable person. And of course, he's has a mainstream media perspective, but what can you expect? No one expects anything else. And I wouldn't say that as a criticism at all. The story about Korea that we're hearing the drumbeats of, I'll leave you to conclude whether or not Korea is a threat to anybody. I'd say it's not. It is an impotent, postage-sized stamp country with an impoverished population, a minimal gross national product, and incompetence at all the highest levels because it's a communist system, right? There's no real merit. You have party favorites taking the high positions, and it is incompetent to do anything. And to pretend that it's a threat to us, as President Trump did in his speech yesterday, is just laughable. There's a quote that Bo Marinov has circulated in the past couple of days from General MacArthur, and I think it captures the local economy perspective on the North Korean crisis. Right? It is a crisis, and General MacArthur, who was a no-nonsense, no-bluff public official and military man, he said, "Our government has kept us in a perpetual state of fear, kept us in a continuous stampede of patriotic fervor, with the cry of grave national emergency. Always there has been some terrible evil at home or some monstrous foreign power that was going to gobble us up if we did not blindly rally behind it by furnishing the exorbitant funds demanded. Yet, in retrospect, these disasters seem never to have happened, seem never to have been quite real." Rhonda Thurman likes Dr. Brian Johnson, the new head of the school board. There's a story on TV9's website in which she is quoted, "I would like to see third graders, a huge percentage of our students, read by the third grade. I don't think that's an unattainable goal. I think that's something he can answer if we can't do that." There was a brief meeting Tuesday night, and Rhonda Thurman, I'd say Rhonda Thurman is probably the best member of the school board, and I'd say probably represents you, my listener, and thousands of other people as well, in the way she looks at things. Right? She is for the established system. She is not against it inherently, as I am. And so, though she is in it, she is very critical of the way it operates, and she's not given to sales pitches, which is what you have a lot of if you're in the school business. Everybody's trying to get on the gravy train. Caller, this is David Tulis, and you've got just half a minute. What's on your mind?
Yes, this is Deborah Maddox.
Yes, Deborah, thanks for calling. This is David Tulis, and we're talking with Deborah Maddox, who was overseeing a program that helps people who are felons, who have felony records, criminal convictions, or admissions to felonies in the plea bargaining scheme, to find work. Now, Deborah, I really appreciate your calling. We're going to go. We have some important announcements to make. Can I hold on to you for just a minute and
Sure.
have you chat with my listener in just a couple minutes?
No problem.
Okay, thanks so much. This is David Tulis, and we are live here at 92.7 and 95.3 HD4 Nooga Radio, local economy and free market. And we're going to talk next with Deborah Maddox about a program that helps felons, people such as the ones we've been mentioning, Robert Whipple, for example, gain work once they are out from behind the cell. David Tulis, some important announcements. Hang on.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.